Okay, before we finish up Chapter 9, let's do a little review. Which form of horizontal gene transfer requires cell-to-cell contact? Is it A, transformation, B, conjugation, C, transduction, D, conjugation and transduction, or E, all of the above? Go ahead and pause the video, think about this one. All right, the key point here is cell-to-cell contact. The only mechanism we talked about is conjugation, which is that little pilus that connects the two bacteria, and then they can transfer genetic material from one to the other. All right, to finish this chapter, we've talked about evolution, we've talked about mechanisms of creating genetic variability. We're now going to talk about how we describe the vast diversity of microbes that we have out there. This is a complicated topic. How do you define what is a species of bacteria? And what are the problems with doing that? We will talk a little bit about that, but we won't get into it too deep. Again, my Micro 250 class, we talk a lot about this. This is a very philosophical question. We're going to explain how microbes are identified and talk about some of the advantages and limitations of a process called a dichotomous key, compared with what we call a probabilistic indicator, both identification methods. So classifying microbes. As humans, we like to organize things. We like to sort them and put them into little boxes and say, these are these things and these are these things. We have a whole science for this, for life. It's called taxonomy, which is this description of distinct life forms and organizing them into categories, generally with shared traits. There's a couple different parts of this. Classification is organizing life into groups. We call those taxa. So that's like you have your domains, right? You have the bacteria, and then you have the archaea, and then you have the eukaryotes. And in the eukaryotes, you have plants and animals and fungi, right? And getting further and further down, you have more specific groups that you're putting things into. Classification can be done in many ways. Can be done, do the things look the same? Do they do the same processes? That was how it was done for a very long time. More recently, we've started basing our classification on a science that we call phylogeny, which is the study of the evolutionary history and relatedness of organisms. So this is getting more into our tree of life. We have at the bottom an ancestor, and from that ancestor, all of the life on Earth evolved. So this is looking at how closely evolutionarily related things are. So one interesting byproduct of starting to use phylogeny, which ultimately uses DNA techniques, because we look at the genomes, see how similar they are, is in the olden days, really not that long ago, let's say probably about 30 to 40 years ago. 30 years ago, we really started to phylogeny started to take off. So about 30 years ago, if we had done a botany class, right? A botany class is the study of plants. In botany, we would have also covered fungi, because for a long time it was thought that fungi and plants were very closely related, right? They don't move, they seem very similar, they grow kind of similarly. They were thought to be related to one another. But through the science of phylogeny, studying DNA and evolutionary relatedness, we now know that fungi are more closely related to animals than plants. So you're more closely related to a fungus than you are to plants. That is one of the results that comes out of phylogeny. There's all kinds of crazy things that it's shaking up the classification in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's confirming what we already thought, but phylogeny is kind of the ultimate way to do this. Now, if you're going to classify things, you have to have a standardized way of naming stuff, a standardized set of terms and way of talking about things. This is the science of nomenclature, which is maybe you think boring, but it's about having standardized systems of naming, right? We have genus and species, things like that. So these are all sciences that are trying to organize the diversity of life that we see out there. Deciding what is the same species or what is a different species is difficult when it comes to bacteria. Animals, we tend to use what we call the biological species definition. That is, can these two organisms reproduce with one another? If so, they are the same species. For animals, that tends to work very, very well. Plants, things get messy. Plants are very promiscuous, let's say, but with animals, that works. Bacteria reproduce clonally. So we have to rely more on phylogeny to define species. But there's a question, how much genetic difference means that you're a new species? That's an open question for debate. And there are other ways of classifying things, like whether they can cause disease or not, or things like this. Using phylogeny, though, usually we can sequence genomes of two organisms and compare them and start to break them down into groups. We have the domain here. That's bacteria, right? If we're talking about bacteria. There are divisions or phyla in there. We don't need to know these middle ones here: class, subclass, order, family. We'll talk a little bit about the superfamilies in the diversity chapter. But then we have the genus, right? Like Streptomyces or Escherichia, plague. We have Yersinia, and then species, right? So like Escherichia coli or Yersinia pestis. There are other ones. Yersinia pseudotuberculosis is a different species of the plague-causing bacteria. So scientists use phylogeny, the DNA sequence relatedness, and they tend to look at ecology, shared traits, ecological niche, and they use these two factors to make judgment calls about what is a species and how do we classify different bacteria. There is often debate in this process. People think it's a new species, think it's not a new species. They argue back and forth. They come to a consensus, hopefully, or they keep arguing forever. Sometimes that happens, right? So to do this, right, you need to identify things about the microbe. So once we have everything classified, cool. But then, right, we're getting samples and things like that, and we've talked a lot about this in this course. How do you actually identify a microbe down to the species level, right? You grew your plates in the lab and they had random microbes on there. How would you go about actually identifying specifically what microbe that is? Well, again, this is difficult for bacteria, right? If you look at a plant or an animal, like a plant, you can look at the parts of the flower and how it's growing and things like that. Or the animal, you can look at the shape and the color and the size and all these things. But for bacteria, they're hard to observe, right? You need a microscope. So that's already like a barrier to identifying things. We can look at the colony morphology and the cell morphology. But really, the best way is to sequence part or all of the microbe's genome. That can help us. We could then put it into a database and search and see if there's anything related to it. In the clinic, that is a little bit too expensive, too time-consuming for this. We use a mix of DNA methods and growth methods in the clinic. So practically, identification combines phylogeny and what we call phenotypic traits, things we can observe. Can it ferment lactose? Can it not ferment lactose, right? And there are two ways that we're going to talk about that lead to an ultimate identification of a microbe. The first is something that you maybe have seen. If you've ever tried to identify a plant in your yard or something like that, you may have heard of a dichotomous key. So dichotomy means splitting in two, and this is a key to identify microbes. The dichotomous key is set up as a series of either or questions. And there's different ones for different things. So this is a dichotomous key for gram-negative bacteria. So we've already identified that it is gram-negative. Then we start asking some questions. Is it less than 1 micrometer in cell width? Or is it 1 to 3 micrometers in cell width? Depending on the answer, we follow the different branches. Let's go this way because there's no other options over here. It is between 1 and 3 micrometers. Okay, now we have another set of questions. Are filaments straight to smoothly curled or filaments coiled? Well, if the filaments are coiled, it's Nostocodia limoncola. If not, we go on, right? Does it have a sheath? Does it have no sheath? Here, right, if it has a sheath, is it false branching or no branching? So you could identify a species here in this orange, right? Sphaerotilus natans is one, and Thiotrix is another one. This is probably a group of microbes. There's probably a second key that you have to go to do this. If we go the other way, right, if there was no sheath, is it motile? Are the cells rectangular? Are they square? Are they barrel-shaped, right? So on and so forth down the line. You use these pairs of questions to come to an ultimate answer. For us, this is far beyond us. Like, I couldn't look at just a random microbe and understand all of these things. You have to be trained in what these terms mean, right? Like, it's very specific for certain groups. I don't know what branching or false branching is because I'm not a clinical microbiologist. So you need some training to use this, right? That's a key problem with this method. So sometimes, right, things are in between or they don't line up nicely. So it's not always perfect in the real world. But using this, we could identify different strains or different species. It's slow, though, and you need training. There is a different method called a probabilistic indicator that is a more rapid test based on metabolism. So in this, what is called a 96 well plate, because there are 96 wells in it, surprise, surprise, there are a bunch of different tests that look at whether microbes can use certain sugars or amino acids. Can they do, do they make lactic acid? Can they survive with different sodium? How about pH? So we do this whole battery of different tests, and then we take those tests based on metabolism and enter the results into a computer database. The computer compares the results like a fingerprint to known microbial samples, and it gives a probability that what you're looking at is whatever species it says. So in this case, it says maybe it's a 99% match to Stenotrophomonas maltophilia, right? It gives you a probability that is close to that based on the evidence that's in the database. So this is much quicker. You may need much less training. In fact, you could probably have a computer, a robot, set up this whole experiment and observe the results, right? Because a camera could look at the colors that are in here. So you just need one person that starts the thing, and then the computer can do the rest. This is a much less skilled technique than our dichotomous key, right? You need a lot of training. This is much slower. This process can give you a much finer, much accurate identification of the microbe. Okay, that is it for the unit. So 9.5, we talked about kind of how do we define a new strain of microbe. Usually that requires sequencing its genome now. We talked about some identification methods, DNA tests, phenotypic traits. We can use those to identify. We have the dichotomous key versus the probabilistic test battery. Taxonomy, that's the science of describing and organizing life into taxa. And we have classification, nomenclature, and phylogeny in there. And we have that hierarchical system, right? We have the domain, bacteria, and then in there we have subgroups, and that all is based on traits, but also now increasingly on genome sequence. All right, that is it for the unit. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. Bye for now.